Hello. It's an honor to speak to Ian's group, and it's fun. And his invitation was for me to share about shadow work. And my name is Doug Iveson. Ian and I met through one of Tony Robbins' seminars and have connected pretty deeply. It's been, I think, deep connection for both of us. Deep value. It's good to have other people on the playground, so that, when you're doing the deep stuff, you have somebody who knows what the heck you're going through. And that's something I'll say more about. Before I get into talking about the shadow, I'll share briefly my current frontier. Over a month ago, somebody invited me to give a talk about Star Wars spirituality, which I'll be giving on May the 3rd, the day before May the 4th be with you. And because when I speak, I prefer to speak not just from past experience, which is valuable, but to also speak from current experience. I've been kind of immersing myself in the topic of knowing. Like when Luke shares with Leia, the Force is strong in my family. My father has it. I have it. And my sister has it. And she goes, I know. Somehow I've always known. What does intuitive knowing look like? And it's too big of a topic. But the long story short is I've been immersing myself in that. And that ends up being very related, very well related to shadow work and wholeness. Because knowing lets you access something while also having some space around it. Like you don't have to immerse in it in order to be deeply related to it. And I'll come back to that. What is the shadow? First of all, the term gets used differently in different contexts. And I mean, Abraham Hicks will talk a lot sometimes about contrast and how it's valuable to get contrast. Well, how I'm going to express the shadow, this is not that. I'm going to be using the term the shadow more in the way that Carl Jung originally used the term, where it's this semi-conscious or unconscious thing operating in our dynamics, or things operating in our dynamics that have value, but because we're not really engaging them directly, they end up showing as having drawbacks. And I'm understating it. It's stuff that at the worst of times feels like it's evil or dysfunctional, and at the best of times feels like it's immature. And that's where I'm really starting to come from more and more when I'm dealing with the shadow. As I deal with the shadow as if it's immature strengths. And these strengths have stayed immature in me and in my life because I've been turning my attention away from them. Because at the best of times I've been directing my attention where I want it to go and avoiding something. And at the worst of times, I've been just shutting something down, repressing it, suppressing it and repressing it, which just means it stays in my body, So there's a lot of spirituality out there, valuable spirituality, that is about the redirection of attention. But as Dafri John, later called Adida, talked about, the redirection of attention has its ups and its downs. It has limitations. If I'm redirecting attention because something calls for it right now, great. If I'm redirecting attention all the time, if that's my primary or maybe my only way of dealing with my spirituality and the issues that come up, then I end up doing what's sometimes called bypassing. I end up not fully engaging with what's going on. And you know what? That's an honorable path. It's still being taught after thousands of years. So I'm not saying people who always are doing the redirection of attention, like Tony Robbins is probably a great example. He's an amazing man, and he's made contributions to the planet that, frankly, he's done more than I've done. I'm grateful for Tony's work. But for me, there's also places that it doesn't go, that I choose to go. And why? Why would I ever do shadow work? For one thing, because I find that if I'm choosing to redirect attention, or always letting go, or always attempting to get rid of or shift what I've got going on in my being as if it's something to change. Dealing with it as something to change, it leads to pendulum swings sometimes. I mean, in Christian context, and I still gain from the Christian context, so I'm not tossing all of that out. But in Christian context, you hear, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Sometimes that's an experience I've had, and other times I've had the experience of I shall make something into a truth, and that truth will make me pendulum swing. Like I'm so much focused on trying to put my attention over here and put my attention over here, and what am I turning away from? And am I in imbalance? And am I putting more and more effort into maintaining that imbalance to the point where I can't ignore this anymore, and it comes back? And it's because I am not dealing with it directly, not getting related to it, that it continues to be this thing that I have to turn away from. It continues to be this thing that I have not matured. And that if I start to deal with that more directly, more inclusively, more as if everything in the universe might have value, dealing with it in those terms, and seeing where I can integrate something or upgrade something, then it starts to be not only that I feel more whole, but also that I end up not having to spend so much effort forever. Like the effort that it takes to maintain an imbalance, to maintain redirection of attention, is worthy. And if it's really practiced, it's not that hard. I'm not saying it's hard. If it's practiced, it becomes easy. But there are drawbacks to having to always let that go, or always redirect away from that. And how would it be? And by the way, if you've done NLP work, you know that I'm about to give you an embedded command, so forgive me and do what you want with this. How would it be to have major issues in our lives suddenly become, or with practice, become easier? How would it be to have them even be something that we can not only unwind and untangle, but to have it be that there are things that we can actually unwrap, that there's actually gifts there to be incorporated and included and given context. Like we don't want the things that are consciousness dominating to dominate our consciousness necessarily, with selective moments allowed. It's great sometimes to have something dominate your consciousness. There's some fun there and some productivity there, like deep work or playing full out. Some imbalances are worth having, especially if you know how to bring back balance, how to bring back wholeness, so that you're having imbalances when you choose them. But to have it be that something is consciousness dominating and I have no choice about that, that's not the plan. And so, first of all, you get into the shadows to have wholeness. Secondly, you get into the shadow work to make things easier. And thirdly, you get into shadow work because you begin to learn the difference between transformation and change. There's a lot of work in spiritual contexts that's about personal change. Great work, and the terms are kind of not necessarily used distinctly. So you may be using the word change and you're talking about transformation. I'm not saying that the language is right and wrong. I'm saying that there's a difference between judging myself and trying to do something different, like redirect my attention or change my intention or change my word, all those things that have to do with change. That's valuable. But there's another process where you look at what you're attempting to create in life or either bring to life or at least bring into being. And you recognize that there's an inner resource already here that would support that you could just draw on unchanging presence and you would have the peace you're looking for. Or maybe you draw on this relatedness that's always available and have that presence, the thing that you'd like to have. Or these inspiring possibilities that are always available. The possibilities of being grounded, creative, effective, loving, receptive, expressive, aware, connected. These possibilities of being that you can use to bring energy into the body, or that you can see as vast spaces in which to rest. These ever-changing possibilities are also resources available from within that are already here. They're already in the design of who we are. Some of them, like presence, may be unchanging. Some of them, like inspiring possibilities, are constantly changing. But they're all part of our design that we have them available. When I bring something into being, or bring it to life, coming from that kind of a context of who I deeply am, is that change? I'm already that, or it's already part of what's available in who I am. Is that change? Or maybe it's not change, it's just bringing something out to play, coming out to play. And in some contexts, like Landmark, they'll use a different word for that. They'll call it transformation. Because it's not really change. And it require judging yourself. You can do any of that work where you draw an unchanging presence, or this available relatedness between us, or relatedness with things in life. You can be related to the rock, or related to the thought, or related to the feeling, or related to these resources that we're talking about. Related to the resources, kind of a self-reference that makes it deeply present. That isn't really change, so we call it transformation. That's another benefit of shadow work. When you begin to get how this thing that was going on actually has light in the core of the darkness. Like there's an essence of who I deeply am underneath this anger. Now I might need to find that the anger is driven by fear, and that the fear is driven by not recognizing who I really am, and that the not recognize who I really am is because I'm attached to an outcome, and that beyond attachment to the outcome is authentic desire that can be held loosely. Like there's ways, when you get into in a lot of the work where you're redirecting the attention, you have to choose between honoring a feeling, or transforming that feeling, or shifting that feeling. Change the thought. Realize, I made up a story. This isn't even real. I'm just having feelings about a story. Oh, now I see that. It's shifted. Great work. And why did I make up that story is shadow work. Is there a purpose that I was trying to serve, to love myself? That's shadow work. Where you start to get that there was maybe something, a gem, underneath the coal. Or this immature strength had a strength in it. So we learn to honor the light at the core of the darkness. And I'm going to get into some techniques for doing that. And by the way, there's also darkness at the core of the light, in the sense that we tend to operate from our strengths, for better and for worse. Like I don't do I don't use the resource that's best for the job. I'll use the resource that I'm best at. Oh, that package you got. Let me help you open it. I'll go get my hammer because I'm so good with a hammer. Not the best tool for the job. It's just the tool that I happen to be best at. So those are when we overuse our strengths. Some of our weaknesses are just our strengths being overused. And that's when you got light, darkness at the core of the light too. So it goes both ways sometimes. The light at the core of the darkness. Now, before I get into actually doing the work, I want to talk briefly about why you would not do shadow work, or when to not do shadow work. Shadow work is a real challenge if it's a challenge to your belief systems. If you think that there's good and evil, and you should look at evil as a contrast and redirect attention, I honor that. People who've been contributing to the transformation of the planet have been doing that work for thousands of years. There's nothing wrong with that work. And besides, it would be kind of hypocritical or contradictory if I said that there's that beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, and I will meet you there. And that's what we're talking about right now today. Honoring the things that we sometimes would call evil and finding a way to find a light in the core of the darkness. It'd be kind of ironic if I took those concepts and I made them right, and other concepts wrong. If I made redirection of attention wrong. That would be kind of contradictory, wouldn't it? But also, there's times in life for focus. And there's times in life for openness. And when the times of life for focus, I'm usually doing what might be called intention-based work. Like I'm creating something in life and I'm going to focus on what I'm creating, and I'm going to bring the resources that call to that, including resources for being, like being creative. Notice how if you say to yourself, I open the possibility of being creative, and you say that right now to yourself, I open the possibility of being creative. Notice if that possibility feels at all inspiring. I open the possibility of being creative. Is there energy that comes into the body? Or is the possibility of being creative, does that feel so big for you, so vast, that for you it's something you can rest in? Vast space in which to rest. And there's this partnership between energy and rest, this balance and integration of energy and rest that can come out of the partnering of possibility and space. That's a whole other talk. Balance of energy and rest, partnering, possibility, and space. So, but there are times in life where it calls for focus. The examples I gave earlier, playing full out. Good example is sex, Focus. Let yourself delve in and immerse, You don't have to be thinking about everything in your life in those moments. Let yourself have some imbalance, And you know how to bring wholeness back. And you can learn to bring, as you learn to practice wholeness and have it accessible as a quality and a space, you can bring it. You can even bring it to sex, or getting my work done in the middle of the workday, deep work, where I maybe even turn off the music sometimes. Even instrumental music sometimes I'll do when I can do deep work while I'm doing instrumental music, but usually only when I have a really clear vision of where I'm going with the work that I'm working on, as a software developer, as a data analyst. And other times, just doing what I'm doing while I'm doing it. Just engaging the choice that's happening. Engaging the choice that's happening, where it's happening. If it's happening in my head right now, engaging where it's happening. If it's happening in my fingers on the keyboard, engaging the choice where it's happening. If it's happening in my conversations with a coworker or messaging in Teams, engaging the choice where it's happening. Deep work is another imbalance worth having. I just know how to bring balance, how to bring wholeness back in as a context so that I have choice around all this. But, so during times when I'm focused, playing full out, doing deep work, things like that, I'm driving, I'll just focus on driving. Then it works to allow myself to focus, and I'm not necessarily going to do shadow work at that point. And the difference here is, you hear the story of the grandfather talking to the grandson, and the grandfather says, there is a good wolf and this bad wolf inside of me constantly at war. And the grandson says, which one wins? And the grandfather says, the one that I feed. That's great work. That's probably attention redirection work. Letting go of one thing, turning attention to another. Shadow work is a little different. Shadow work is that I strengthen the good wolf to the point where it can companion and counsel the bad wolf. You see, when you're ready to do deep shadow work, intuitive shadow work, is probably when you've practiced some resourceful qualities, either unchanging qualities like presence, or constantly changing qualities like energetics, but something that you know how to get yourself out of trouble. Like you know how to redirect attention if it's called for, or you know how to let go, or you know how to just open and call on higher power, or call on the mother. Call on something that is deeper, or bigger, or more real, or stronger than whatever you're going through. You can presence something to the point where you get that it's stronger and more real and bigger and deeper than the experience you're going through right now. Then you can learn, if you've got that, if you can do that with what's happening right now, and with the things that come up in life, then you may be ready to do that with the things that aren't so easy. And learn to love, or bring love to, the things that are challenging. So let's get into the work now. So first of all, something more cognitive. This is an easy approach, and that is check out your inner questions. We operate a lot in life from questions like, especially when we're growing up or beginning our spiritual life, we learn to operate from what's good and what's evil, what's bad and what's good, and what's right and wrong, what's true and not true. And those are valuable questions, good things to look at. And when we start getting into subtleties, it serves us to play with some different questions. Like we do a lot to figure out what the truth is and what's not the truth, coming up with better answers. And that's great. Keep upgrading your answers. Also look at your questions, because the questions have this power behind the answers that when you shift the inquiry, you've shifted the entire space. So, as Rumi said, beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field. What if instead of asking myself, what's the right thing to do right now? What if instead I ask myself, what's the loving thing to do right now? It's going to cover more territory. I'm not saying get rid of that question of what's the right thing to do, but I've replaced it largely with the question of what's the loving thing to do. Because love fulfills all those things that right question, doing the right thing, would fulfill. And then some. That's one reason. And when I start to ask the question, what's a loving way to be with this? It turns out that I can be loving towards anything. Even with the things that I consider dark stuff. Like, if there's something cold and dark going on, how about if I just make it warm? How about I just bring warmth and light? Dark is not a thing. Dark is a condition. Like the room can be dark, but the room isn't dark because a thing called dark came into the room. Dark is not a thing. The room is dark because I closed out this thing called light. Light is a thing. So while dark may be a condition, it isn't really a thing. You bring light, and that's all you need to do to shift dark. You don't need to get rid of the dark, you just bring light. You don't need to get rid of the cold, you just bring warmth. Light, in this case, might be awareness, warmth might be love, 7 chakras are all useful, and whatever else, other tools you've played with energetically. Bring it. And you don't have to avoid or resist the thing that's being shifted by the thing you're bringing. So changing the question, instead of asking what's the right thing to do, what's the loving thing to do, looking at my questions, sometimes changing a question. That's a more cognitive approach. Secondly, there's a framework. And this is a very generous framework, so it may not work for everyone. This is, for me, it started in the book, The Handbook to Higher Consciousness, where one of his declarations is always us living love. Like his point of view that he chose, and this, Ken Kais-Jr. was just brilliant. I love his work. He's a little bit too transcendent for me, a little bit higher, lower than I think we need to be. I prefer to be integrated, but it's just, you feel different after reading Ken Kais's work. So the Handbook to Higher Consciousness, always us living love. That declaration is saying that everything that happens and that everyone chooses, in some smaller or greater degree, has love behind it. And either, the way Course in Miracles would put it is that everything your brother does is either love or a call for love. And there is no higher order of thinking. That's how Course in Miracles would put this. Well, in the Handbook to Our Consciousness, it's like, yeah, sure, maybe that was a selfish act when I stole the French fries off your plate. But there is a little bit of self-love in it. So, can I take that self-love and add to it love for you? Now, if it's love for both of us, I might ask first. And if you say no, I might order my own. Some other choice that has it be love for all beings, including yourself. And that's the ultimate context of playing with that way of looking at things, is unconditional love for all beings, including oneself. That's proposed by the Handbook. And so what if this thing I do has a trickle of love flowing through it? Can I look for the purpose that it was intended to serve and find a more mature or inclusive way of serving that same purpose? This is also shadow work. Starting to reframe, looking at what were the gains? What was the payoff in what I was doing? And can I take that payoff and find a way to do it in a more inclusive or whole way? And by the way, there's a great script within neuro-linguistic programming, within NLP, called a 6-step reframe. The 6-step reframe is a great way to do that, to take the payoff, the secondary gain, and reprogram it to do it in a more mature way. So look up 6-step reframe. That's an easy way to do that. Now I want to get into experiencing light at the core of the darkness. This is deeper work. If you've never done this before and you've got some trauma that you might have dealt with in your past, you get to choose whether you want to play with this. If you have tools for dealing with difficult emotional contexts, then great. You use your intuition to sense whether you're ready for doing challenging work. Otherwise, this may be something you want to do with a friend. Do it with somebody who's done it before, or do it with a coach, a therapist, somebody who knows the playground. So, this comes from the work of Brandon Bays. Her work is The Journey. And you can go to thejourney.com to find out more about that. From her process called the emotional journey. So, just for now, think of something that you'd like to shift, either something you'd like to heal, or if you feel like dealing with something easy, you can deal with something that you dislike, you have some aversion around. And just allow yourself to experience the feeling that comes up around that, the right now feeling. And as you allow this right now feeling, just allowing it to grow in your awareness, to grow naturally in your awareness, however it does. Could you welcome it enough that you allow yourself to start to go into the core of it, like to relax and go right into the core of it. And as you feel yourself going into the core of it, you might even love yourself, give yourself so much space for this humanity that you open here in the core of it, allowing the feeling, going into the core of it, opening here in the core. And just staying here for now, opening in the core. As you stay open in the core of this, what's here now? What's the feeling? It may be that as you open in the core of it, then it shifts to some degree. As you allow it to expand naturally in your awareness, then it starts to feel like there's another feeling showing up here. And now, could you allow that feeling to be here? Give this feeling space. And as you welcome this, as you give this feeling space and welcome it into the space, welcoming it so much that you allow yourself to go into the core of this feeling. And going into the core of this feeling, allowing yourself to relax and open in the core of this feeling. And as you open in the core of this, notice the next feeling that may show up. And as you allow that feeling to be here, allow this to expand naturally in your awareness, to grow, however it does. And you allow yourself to welcome it and to go into the core of this feeling and open here. And notice as you open in the core of this, what the next feeling is. And this process of opening in the core and opening in the core and going into the core and opening and going into the core and opening, this layer by layer experience starts to feel more expansive. Like it might have just felt like it was in one part of your body, and now then it might feel like it's starting to be in more of your body or all of your body. And if you keep doing that layering process of opening in the core and opening in the core, what you'll find is that the experiences go to a place where it's not inside or outside your body, it's everywhere. And as you name these layers, and if you're doing this with a partner, they can write down the name you give to each layer. Like, what do you call this feeling? Well, what do you call this feeling? You know, you end up with something like unlimited peace. Or if you're in an auditory space, it might be this deep silence. Or if some days you're in a more visual, visionary place, it may be rainbow unicorns. I mean, you know, just however it comes up for you on a given day. And it'll be different on different days often. You get to this feeling where you can actually experience it at the core of any feeling, at the core of any experience is who you deeply are. Related to this thing, that who you are is totally connected to the source of you. That underneath all feelings is being. And then you can take that and work with the other layers with that. Like knowing myself as rainbow unicorns, knowing myself as this vast presence, this stillness, this pure love, this rainbow unicorns. If rainbow unicorns had something to say to the concern for well-being that came up, what would it say? It would say, well, yes, we care about that. And now allow rainbow unicorns to wash through concern for well-being, bathing it in the light of boundless love. And knowing yourself as this vast boundlessness, this stillness, this pure love, and I'm going to pick one of the other names now, this amazing, magical stillness, this unlimited silence. If unlimited silence had something to say to the fear that came up, what would it say? It would say, oh, thank you, you're a messenger. Great. And now allow unlimited silence to wash through fear, bathing it and dissolving it in the light of boundless love. And knowing yourself as this vast boundlessness, this stillness, this pure love, this, let's choose one of the other ones, this amazing peace, this magical peace. If magical peace had something to say to the anger that came up, what would it say? It would say, thank you, you're a stepping stone. And just allow unlimited peace to wash through anger, bathing and dissolving it in the light of boundless love. So that's a form of shadow work where you discover, you open in the core, open in the core, open in the core to get to the experience of your own source within your own being, or your being connected to source, however you frame that. And then use that state, however it came up today, use that state to speak to and wash through the layers above it. And I'm going to do 2 more approaches to shadow work here. This next one is an abbreviation of what we just did. Like if you're practiced at opening in the core, or you're practiced at knowing the being that's deeper than this feeling, who am I really? Or who am I fully? Or who am I wholly? WHOLLY. Wholeness, holy. If you're practiced at doing this, then you might already have access to what I'm going to describe. Otherwise, play with the process we just did before you do this. It is, if I open in the core of what's here, just one layer, if I open in the core of what's here, and I know who I am at my core underneath this, and I let my core underneath this relate to the right now experience. Like if I let the core of who I am relate to the anger, being related to the anger, and I tune into that relatedness. Like as I'm relating to the anger, I tune into the quality of relatedness. And being related to the anger with this relatedness, is there a knowing that shows up? Like relating to the anger, do I have a knowing about the anger? And again, this is about finding out what was the core purpose. What was the secondary gain? What was the payoff? What was the little bit of love? The little light of love between this, the song at the end of Fifth Element that's coming to mind. This little trickle of love, or maybe it's just a faucet, or maybe it's a fire hose. Love shows up in lots of different ways. If I can tune into that loving purpose that was intended to be served, even if it was based on a story, something I made up, that it's all illusion, it still might have a loving purpose. So can I find that loving purpose in the knowing, in the opening in the core, getting related, knowing the knowing, there it is. And I know what's there. And this is a very intuitive way to tune into what's the core purpose behind something like this. And sometimes the knowing is the thing you walk away with. That's all I needed, was to have that knowing. Other times the relatedness is what you walk away with. Like it's not just a goal of knowing. Sometimes it's a goal of being related to what was really there in the core of that. And you operate with that relatedness now. So sometimes you might choose to operate with just the knowing. Sometimes you might choose to operate with the relatedness. It varies. Now, this last way of dealing with shadow work has to do with possibility. Now, of course, I'm not going to have one way of doing this, because possibility, now we're talking about a playground. And again, earlier I went through the chakras briefly. You might have recognized them as what they were because I did hand motions, or because you know them. Like simple declarations for the chakras, and I know this is oversimplified, but these are declarations that, for me, bring a feeling of generating my being, of energy coming into the body, or a vast space in which to rest. So I'm going to say these declarations again. I open the possibility of being grounded, like tuning into the mother. Or I open the possibility of being creative, like how inspiring is creativity. Or I open the possibility of being effective, like being able to make a difference in life, or being able to be cause of something in my world. or another one for that one, another word for that same energy or similar, is I open the possibility of being empowered. And notice how that might bring energy into the body. And being a stand for empowerment, like just not just my own empowerment, but empowerment for reality, for all the people in reality, and all the beings in reality, and for reality itself, to be empowered to be what it is. And I open the possibility of being loving. Of course, that's a recurring theme. We see that one all over the place. Loving shows up as a quality of presence. Loving shows up as the part in the nature of relatedness. And love shows up as an inspiring possibility. So just for now, playing with love as an inspiring possibility. I open the possibility of being loving. Like energy comes into the body for the possibility of being loving. And again, the possibility of being loving, talking about a vast space. How big is that possibility of being loving? That vast space is something in which we can rest. Or I open the possibility of being receptive. And I'm going to use two different words for this one. I open the possibility of being receptive, like letting life in. As part of the communication of life is how we hear the inner voice and hear the realities around us and relate to them and hear what is. And I open the possibility of being expressive, the other side of communication, of letting it out, of, we choose to be open to others in being receptive, and we choose to be open with others in being expressive. So this open communication of the throat chakra, the possibility of being receptive, the possibility of being expressive, it's an openness to, and an openness with. And I open the possibility of being aware. Like who I am is the awareness of things. From that point of view, I am none of the things. I'm not even my thoughts or feelings. I'm none of the things. I am no thing. I am the awareness of them. And this possibility of being no thing has a balance of, I open the possibility of being connected. And now I'm everything. And this is the range of relatedness, being no thing, being the awareness, or being everything, being the connectedness, awareness and connectedness. Being no thing, I'm just aware. I am the awareness, I'm the witness, I'm the observer, I am the noticer. I am the one who is present. I am presence. I am being present as the one who is presence. I allow myself to be present as the one who is presence. And then I allow myself to be present as the one who is connectedness. As the connectedness, where the one is the all. And again, this is a range of relatedness. And it's good to practice the range because I may choose to be connected to all of what's happening in Ukraine right now, some of the time. Other times I may choose to be the witness of that. I may choose to be the noticer of that, so that I can go about whatever I'm focused on, because it might be a time in my life for focus. So I'll focus on whatever I'm focusing on. And then I can come back to the openness and the relatedness. So one way of having things not be overwhelming is to be the awareness of them. They can have the space that they want, and I'm witness of that space. The other one, another one, and to just be an awareness space. Who I am is an awareness space, and then things aren't overwhelming, because who I am is an awareness space right now. Or who I am is the connectedness. I am everything. So that thing, thing that I'm experiencing is a ripple in a pond. And it's a really big pond, and the more I connect to everything, or all of reality right now, whatever is right now, that feels more like a small ripple in the pond. Like I can be with that because, I'm everything. I'm even that. I'm even my body. And I'm my energy body. And I can be with this pain in my body because I'm also the energy body. So sometimes you're just being the witness of the pain, so you aren't as tapped into it. Or other times you're completely connected to it. You're just connected to everything, so it becomes a small ripple in the big pond. And all of these qualities can be brought to the shadow. They can be brought to a difficult experience. Like, how does the possibility of being, knowing myself as the possibility of being grounded, how does groundedness relate to my disappointment yesterday that I didn't work on the thing that I thought I was going to work on? Well, groundedness says that, first of all, that I'll have more time. I'm picking a real life example, by the way. That groundedness says that I will have other times to work on it. And groundedness also says, based on past experience, that my boss, my supervisor, will understand how it played. Like, he's going to give me space to continue that on Monday. And groundedness also says that if I lost my freaking job, I could get another one. Because I've done that before. Both finding another job, I've done that before, and losing a job, I've done that before too. And it's all in the range of humanity, and it's all welcome. And again, to not be overwhelmed, give your experience space. Welcome it into the space, and know the space. As you give things space, and you tune into the quality of space, space is always here. And space is restful. And space is a thing to rest in. Space is always here. Space is restful. Space is a thing to rest in. Love energy to you all. Thank you for sharing your time.